So this was surprising. Noam Chomsky has been, an outspoken, I would say, dissident voice on Ukraine, as he often is when it comes to foreign policy, and certainly the media's coverage here in the U.S. of foreign policy. He recently gave an interview in which he gave credit to a very unexpected person, given Chomsky's overall views of this individual. He actually credits Donald Trump for some of the things that he has said on Ukraine. Let's take a listen and we'll react on the other side.
So going back to the one Western statesman, he didn't mention all of this, but he suggested something similar. Move towards negotiations and diplomacy instead of escalating the war. Try to see if you can bring about an accommodation, which would be roughly along these lines. His name is Donald J. Trump.
Okay, wow. Now very important to note that in the very next breath, and I think we have this tweet from Glenn as well, he goes on to say, Trump is a dangerous figure. I mean, he uses quite, he says that he is one of the most dangerous figures in the world. So he's not saying like, oh, now I think Donald Trump is great. I also think it is very much worth noting and very important here to say, Trump has been everywhere on all over the ideological map when it comes to Ukraine, basically throwing out every talking point from the extreme hawkish to the, more like what I would like to see, pushing for a negotiated settlement, that type of language. He has truly been all over the map. So the idea that he's been consistently pushing for peace is ludicrous. Right. The statement that Chomsky is referring to there, let's go ahead and put that up on the screen. He did issue this one statement that I also thought was pretty decent. He said, it doesn't make sense that Russia and Ukraine aren't sitting down and working out some kind of agreement. If they don't do it soon, there will be nothing left but death, destruction, and carnage. This is a war that never should have happened, but it did. The solution can never be as good as it would have been before the shooting started, but there is a solution, and it should be figured out now, not later, when everyone will be dead. Okay, that's true. Fair enough. He also, though, remember he floated that idea of let's paint
the Chinese
flags onto our fighter jets and then bomb the shit out of Russia. Something like that is basically what he said. He's floated all kinds of really terrible ideas, and he's also used similarly extreme language to describe what is happening in Ukraine and also his view of Putin. We have a little bit of that from his recent interview with Piers Morgan. Let's take a listen.
So what would you do right now in Ukraine if you were the president?
Putin uses the N-word. I call it the N-word. He uses the N-word, the nuclear word, all the time. That's a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. He uses it on a daily basis. And everybody's so afraid, so afraid. And as they're afraid, he uses it more and more. That's why he's doing the kind of things he's doing. He's doing them because he thinks nobody's going to ever attack us because they're all stupid and they're afraid to talk about it.
I totally agree with you.
Okay?
So what would you do about it?
Instead of, excuse me, it's a little complicated.
I'm sorry.
Instead of kowtowing, instead of Biden saying, oh, he's got nuclear weapons. He keeps saying he's got we have better weapons. We have the greatest submarine power in history.
So what would you say and do?
I would say we have far more than you do, far more powerful than you, and you can't use that word ever again. You cannot use the nuclear word ever again. And if you do, we're going to have problems.
When you see the scenes, Mr. President, of maternity hospitals being bombed,
I think it's terrible, yeah.
When you see refugees being attacked as they flee, grandmothers, children, babies, you see the decimation of previously prosperous cities living in a thriving new democracy. When you watch what's happening, I mean, do you agree with my assessment that Vladimir Putin is now an evil, genocidal monster?
Yeah, but I also,
you do?
When I look at, I do, sure. Who wouldn't?
So again, he's been all over the map. I mean, I also would, so that first thought, he's basically saying, oh, if he kept saying we're going to, potentially use nuclear weapons.
Then we'll do it.
Then we're going to threaten him right back and be like, oh yeah, well ours are bigger and better. Okay, so maybe not the statesman and the peacemaker that we would want him to be.
It was funny whenever he was saying, he's like, Putin should never use the nuclear word. I'm like, I remember a little episode called Fire and Fury.
Yeah, how about that?
The world with fire and fury, the world has never seen before.
How about that?
And I was terrified at that time. I legitimately thought, a war with North Korea could break out until, I thought that one of the best things he did as president was just go meet with Kim Jong-un. I mean, look, Kim Jong-un obviously is a problem. It's not like the nuclear program has been shut down or any major diplomatic solution was reached. But I mean, what was that, like 6 years ago now that he met with Kim Jong-un? And we haven't had similar escalation in rhetoric or nuclear testing. So it clearly did something. And I think that's a great thing for the U.S. policy towards North Korea. So I would encourage the side of Trump, obviously, that wants diplomacy. But I almost found Chomsky's statement kind of disingenuous in that way, where I was like,
a little like tongue-in-cheek, I think.
Like, look, Trump says a lot of stuff. Like, what does he mean?
He said everything you could imagine saying.
For every statement saying that Trump wants peace, we've played here, Trump would be like, it's a Holocaust, what's happening? And I'm like, dude, these words of a president matter. Joe Biden, who said war crimes, right? He said Biden wants to call it a war crime. Biden wants to call him a genocidal maniac. Biden says, by God, this man cannot remain in power. I mean, essentially, you're seeing a uniparty in terms of the agreement between the two in terms of rhetoric. Now, on the margins, one says MiGs or not. I'm again sending the MiGs there, to be 100% clear. But that really is just the divergence of two different approaches, or same side of the coin, so to speak, whenever it comes to both of their policies. So unfortunately, we do not really have any major statesman in the United States right now calling for peace at the highest level of U.S. politics. And that, I think, is a tragedy of which we may rue the day for wanting that to happen. It may seem like things are on a downswing there. Listen, that war with Ukraine, the civil war in Ukraine previously, that lasted for 8 years, guys. Like, we are still in the very infancy of, it may turn out that we may not even think about this period of the war. We may remember the first couple of days, of which it was clearly, it didn't work. A new major offensive and all that stuff. Sometimes it takes months. Who knows what's gonna happen? All I know is right now, there are not diplomats meeting with each other. There are U.S. diplomats going over there and saying, hey, here's all the weapons you could ever possibly want. Who knows how it works out? Yeah, no, I think that's all well said. And this new funding request, it's meant apparently to fund them through September. So it tells you, I mean, they certainly don't see like any sort of immediate cessation of hostilities. And then how much we're going to send after that? And then what? And then what? And then what? Every escalation, every day, every week, every month that this continues, every additional risk that we take, like Nancy Pelosi showing up in Kyiv along with a congressional delegation, inches us closer to disaster, to the edge. I mean, it's easy at this point to get kind of complacent about the actual risks that you're facing here. And I do think the Adam Kinzinger tweet that we put up earlier that he wants a authorization for use of military force. He wants to authorize, like preemptively authorize a war if Russia takes certain egregious actions. I think the timing of that is also really noteworthy because he wants to get ahead of it when it seems like, it's not really a live issue. And so it's easier to sell the American people on something like that when it's not imminent. When it's like, oh yeah, we want to send this strong signal that of course we're going to back Ukrainians. Whereas when you were actually faced with the question, okay guys, are you ready now to go to war? It would be a very different question, very different sentiment from the American people. So you can just see the way that people are being manipulated. You can also see the way that any sort of dissenting voices are just completely shut down, censored. I saw PayPal banned a couple of independent news outlets recently. For what? Mint Press and another one. I don't know. I mean, they're basically, they view themselves as anti-imperialists. I honestly am not that familiar with their content to like co-sign or not what they're doing, but I do think it's another indication of how how dominant our tech sector is and how much the US dominates the global financial system. That's being weaponized against Russia, but it can also be weaponized against our own citizens. No question. And that's what we're starting to see increasingly. Yeah, that is just the scariest thing. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it. That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world. So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.